This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Vermont is a small state, and one of the ways you can tell that is that we have only one of a lot of things. We have one target, one representative to the U.S. House, and one law school. Vermont Law and Graduate School is a fixture in the small town of South Royalton in Windsor County. Life there would be very different without the school and its students. Today on the show, we're going to share an episode of Brave Little State about the law school and the town's connection to it. Then we'll be joined for a live conversation by a Vermont Supreme Court justice and a lawyer who both went to Vermont Law and Graduate School. As you listen, if you have thoughts or a personal story to share about the law school, you can send us an email now to vermontedition@vermontpublic.org, and we'll open up our phone lines after we air this episode. Now, let's listen together to Brave Little State.
Okay, ready? From Vermont Public and the NPR network, this is Brave Little State. I'm Sabine Poux.
I'm Frances Mize. From the NPR network, I'm Frances Mize.
Yeah, straight from it.
All right.
So, Frances, when you and I were...
This is my roommate and dear friend, Frances. A few weeks ago, I asked her if she'd let me roll tape while we were chatting. She kindly obliged.
We're sitting outside of Arby's Delicatessen on the South Royalton Green, and we live about 12 minutes from here.
I don't know if that's going to make it in, because that's kind of personal.
Frances has lived near South Royalton for years. I'm a newcomer. So when I decided to move to this area, she suggested I drive around and get a feel for it, best I could.
The first time I ever visited this here town, South Royalton, I texted you my observations. Can you read them? Can we find them in your phone?
Sabine said, "Why were there multiple young, hot people walking around South Royalton?" I responded, "I know. It's hot there. Vermont Law School is the reason why."
Look, I have no shortage of small-town love in my heart. Still, I think it's fair to say that if you're hoping to spot young, hot people ambling around in big numbers, you're better off setting your sights on the big city. But, like Frances said, this small town has something that others don't. Vermont Law and Graduate School, the state's only law school.
Do you see a lot of people from the law school on dating apps?
Yeah. These people are all over Hinge.
Can you tell on Hinge when someone's here from the law school?
That's a good question. Yes, there's a certain look sometimes to a Vermont law school student.
Can you describe the look?
Just a certain glimmer in their eye.
The glimmer of justice.
The glimmer of justice, right.
The law school's footprint in this part of the state is no joke. About 400 of its students live here in tiny South Royalton and the surrounding communities. They make up something like half of South Royalton's population. The law school's been around since the early 1970s, when it was founded by Anthony Doria, a local landowner and serial entrepreneur who left a lot of unpaid bills and, ironically, more than one lawsuit in his wake. Anthony first started another school, Royalton College. The law school was sort of tacked on. And while the original institution went out of business, the law school persisted. And it quickly carved out a niche befitting its bucolic setting. Over time, this scrappy institution came to boast one of the best environmental law programs in the country. Make no mistake, the school didn't trade scrappiness for snobbery. It doesn't really attract typical buttoned-up corporate lawyer types. I mean, there are compost toilets in the main academic building. The slogan on the school's website is Idealists, Realists, Catalysts for Change. Some alumni stay in Vermont to practice law. 3 of the 5 Vermont Supreme Court justices right now are graduates of the law school.
The conversation about where the law school fits into all of our lives has been omnipresent my whole life.
This is Tess Mix. She spent her childhood just up Route 110 from South Royalton, in neighboring Tunbridge, and she recently moved back home. The law school is basically her neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, I go to their gym. I donated blood today at the law school.
But for as long as she can remember, there's been this sort of black cloud hanging overhead. She says the law school's presence in town has felt tenuous.
Everybody's scared, I think, of maybe finding out that maybe the law school is actually truly going to actually move up to Burlington, even though they've been saying this since I was a kid. Like this conversation that happens every few years has been happening as long as I can remember.
Moving the law school to Burlington. It's an idea that was floated a few years ago when the school was looking for ways to fix its financial problems. And it seemed plausible. They already have a satellite office there, and it's easier to get to Burlington from other places than it is South Royalton. It wasn't the first time upping sticks for the big city came up, and it probably won't be the last either.
That's the thing. It's like constantly like, well, it's cyclical. Like every few years, someone's like,
Tess says her mom, who's been in the area since the law school started, she's been hearing these rumors for more than 50 years. And even though the school's still around, so are the rumors. That makes Tess nervous. She wants to open a restaurant right on the town green.
I have a dream of reopening the pub that I went to as a kid. But yeah, I think that honestly, again, like the fear goes to if the law school wasn't here, would it be financially viable?
So she wants to know.
My question is, does South Royalton and the surrounding towns actually have to worry about the Vermont Law School leaving, or is it just a recurring rumor?
South Royalton is the platonic ideal of a New England town. Look no further than the opening credits of the TV show Gilmore Girls, where shots of South Royalton stand in as Stars Hollow. The town is sandwiched between I-89 and the White River, and the law school campus is pretty much the first thing you see when you cross the bridge into town. Drive a little further and you'll get to the geographic heart of the community, a gazebo-dotted town green bordered by a church, train tracks, and a strip of locally owned businesses, including not one, but 2 bustling coffee shops. It's here where the energy of the law school is undeniable. On weekday mornings, groups of students huddle over their laptops at First Branch Coffee, which acts as a de facto student library.
I do have a good, solid community of local folks and my regular people, but I feel like they're a decent percentage of our day-to-day sales. So are the professors.
Owner Lauren Adamoli says she hires law students to work the front.
So it's just such a hub. There's people that live upstairs that are law school students. So I don't know. I feel like just being right in the center.
A few doors down is the South Royalton Legal Clinic, the law school's version of a teaching hospital. Clients come from all over Vermont to get pro bono legal help from students and their supervising attorneys on family law cases and on appeals to the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Trying to navigate the legal system on the VA end is nearly impossible.
Lawrence Creech is an Army vet who lives in Rochester. He says the VA messed up an operation he had back in 2019. With the clinic's help, he's been fighting to be compensated since.
You know, it's been saving my mental part of my being by able to talk to somebody and saying, it's okay, it's going to be all right, things are going to get better, we're going to try to help you. It gives you encouragement.
After school, law school students get drinks at Crossroads. Professors take meetings at Worthy Burger. And on a handful of winter nights, you'll find a considerable law school contingent in nearby Woodstock at the Union Arena. That's because Vermont Law and Graduate School has a hockey team. They attract a sizable, very rowdy crowd. One first-year law student is dressed as the team's mascot, the Fighting Swan. It's a riff on the swan included in the school's official academic seal, an emblem that stands for dignity, strength, and grace. Get in there! Come on, From the coffee shop to the legal clinic to the ice, law students are everywhere, even on the local airwaves.
We're going to keep going with our 90s theme here on the One Woman Show, where we listen to women in country, folk, and bluegrass music.
Julia Wickham is a second-year law school student studying agricultural law. On this Tuesday night, she's in the DJ chair at Royalton Community Radio, the local volunteer-led radio station housed above an old garage on the law school's campus. 4 of her law school friends eat pizza and pore over a course catalog in the room next door.
It was free pizza on campus.
They ran over there to go get it.
Julia's from a small town in Iowa. She loves that South Royalton is small too.
Growing up in a small town and then being, living in one, I knew that it was really important to me to kind of jump in and meet folks. So I feel like this year's been really busy, but I feel like I've made a good little path through the town. Yeah.
It's great to have these kids around.
Question asker Tess Mix again.
And I can't believe I'm saying kids. I used to think they looked so much older than me, but they're not anymore. It's just great. It's a great thing to have the school here. It adds a lot of just energy to the community.
Energy and also money. Law students rent a lot of the homes in town. The school pays taxes to Royalton and has scholarships for local kids.
There's an economy here based on the law school, and I totally understand that. I'm wondering if we're as reliant on it as we think. But also, I don't want the law school to go anywhere.
Well, Tess, we have good news for you. About a month into the law school's spring semester, I visited campus to put Tess's question directly to the source, Rod Smola, president of the law school.
I want to ask the question that this question asker had about whether the law school would ever move to a place like Burlington, would ever sort of join up with UVM, for example. Right. What do you say to that?
The easy answer is no. No. People thought about it 5 or 6 years ago. It didn't look feasible, and now it's completely off the table. We're not moving to Burlington.
5 or 6 years ago, the law school was dealing with some big budget issues. Like other law schools around the country, Vermont Law had problems with low enrollment, which led to a lot of financial stress. A few years before Rod became president, the school took tenure away from most of its faculty in an attempt to cut costs. And the school's board of trustees said it was considering a bunch of possibilities to right the ship, including moving the campus to Burlington to be closer to hotels and the airport. Rod says they looked into it and decided it just didn't make sense. They already had the property in South Royalton and had invested a lot into it. And Rod says the rural location is actually a draw for a lot of people.
There's simply no good reason to move, and it would be an enormous headache, very difficult.
Instead of moving, the school did a big rebrand. In 2022, the same year Rod became president, it changed its name from Vermont Law School to Vermont Law and Graduate School. With help from an anonymous $8 million donation, it opened up other graduate programs so students could get master's degrees in things like public policy and restorative justice, not just JDs.
And that's giving us a new stream of enrollment.
And the school amped up its online offerings so students can get law and master's degrees remotely.
And that has proven to be enormously popular. And so it's the blend of the opening of the graduate school and the very robust online law school program that we have that has turned the trick.
Also, the school launched a big fundraising campaign. It's also been working on getting its bar exam passage rates up, an important measure of a law school's success. In other words,
we're here to stay, we're stable, we're not moving. If you're interested in opening a restaurant or a hotel or an apartment complex, come to South Royalton. There's plenty of students that'll buy your services and your stuff.
It sounds like this is sort of a rumor that comes up every couple of years. How can you kind of quantify?
I don't know. I'm hoping this interview does the trick. We made the decision when first day I came. I said we're not moving. The board has said we're not moving, and I still get the questions. Somebody comes up to me, in a wine bar and says, "When are you moving to Berlin?" So you all send the word out. We're not moving. We're here. We love it here.
South Royalton has this really unique young energy. My roommate Frances and I feel it. Question asker Tess feels it.
Things are really happening here. Like people are doing really cool things.
And those cool things are coming from all sorts of places, not just the law school. At least according to Susan Dollenmeyer.
How about this? I only speak from my age group. They don't know anything about the law school, and they don't really care. I'm telling the truth.
I know, but do you think that
Susan is Tess's mom. I met up with the two of them at First Branch, that coffee shop on the main street. Susan's brother-in-law was part of the law school's first ever graduating class in the mid-1970s, and she's been in the area almost as long.
I didn't realize it at the time, because I was part of it, but there was a major influx of what I would call countercultural types. I definitely was one of those people.
She's seen almost 50 years of law school classes come and go.
And the older I got, your dad and I would say, here come the baby law students, because the older you get, the younger they look.
I said the exact same thing when we were talking the other day.
Right.
The thing is, Susan says, most of those baby law students are around for 3 years at a time. The energy that sustains this place long term, it's coming from people who are putting down roots here, starting businesses here.
The co-op next door, in my opinion, has absolutely cemented this community in a way that is mind-blowing. And
people who are running for local office and raising families and moving back home. People like Tess.
Okay, this is another thing. More people Tess's age are coming back here or moving here. Okay?
I would say it's like very, especially like accelerated from the COVID pandemic. Like it's very, you could definitely see this like second return, which is I think very, very similar to what happened in the 1970s.
Yeah, I think it could be.
That story came to us from Brave Little State. Thanks to Tess Mix of Tunbridge for the question and Sabine Poux for her reporting. Since that episode aired, Vermont Law and Graduate School President Rod Smollett announced he would be stepping down from his position to go back to teaching. If you are from South Royalton or the surrounding area, we would love for you to weigh in on what you just heard. How does the law school impact the culture of the region? If you're a small business owner, how does the influx of students in the fall affect your business? You can call in at 800-639-2211. We'll take your calls in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. If you're just joining us, we just listened to a recent episode of the podcast Brave Little State. It was about the role that Vermont Law and Graduate School plays in the Windsor County town of South Royalton. VLGS is unique in that it's the state's only law school. If you have personal ties to the law school or to South Royalton, we would love to hear from you during the rest of this discussion. You can call in at 800-639-2211 or email us at vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Joining me for the rest of the hour are two graduates of Vermont Law and Graduate School. First, we have the Honorable Karen Carroll of the Vermont Supreme Court. She was appointed to be a Superior Court judge in 2000 by Governor Howard Dean. Then in 2017, she was sworn in as an Associate Justice of the Vermont Supreme Court by Governor Phil Scott. Then, just last month, she announced she will be retiring from the bench this August. Justice Carroll, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real honor. And we are also joined right next to you in the studio by your former law clerk and Vermont Law and Graduate School graduate, Andrew Cliburn. He's now a partner with the firm DeMurrell, Olmsted, and Osler in Norwich. Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, first, before we dive into the role that the law school played in your careers and unpacking your work a bit more, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode that we just heard. Justice Carroll, what stuck out to you?
I relate to the decision for people to want to go to Vermont Law School because of its size. That attracted me. I was accepted to law schools where they were city law schools, Boston and others, and I thought to myself, well, I'm from Vermont also, but that it's a good place to study. There's not a lot going on in South
Fewer
Royalton.
distractions.
Exactly. So that is actually what drew me to it. And I do feel like I did get an individualized type of education there. The professors were all really great. And I was able to take the classes that I wanted to, so it wasn't a matter of going to a law school where they didn't really have what it was you wanted to study. So I think I agree with what I heard just now about people wanting to come there and be part of a community as law school students in South Royalton.
And Andrew, what about you? What stuck out to you from that episode?
Well, it was so interesting to hear some of the stories being shared. I came to the law school from Salt Lake City, and I had no idea what to expect. My wife is from the area, so I kind of knew a little bit about what was going on in the Upper Valley, but it was, lots of the stories that I heard rang true. It's the school is a center of gravity in town, but there's also, a very old, rich history in South Royalton, and it's really cool to be there. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about each of your paths to Vermont Law School, which you were both just touching on a little bit. Justice Carroll, you come from a family with a long history in law enforcement. Could you tell us a bit more about how your family background shaped your interest in the criminal justice system?
Sure. My dad was a state trooper in Vermont, and we lived when I was young in the Northeast Kingdom, and then my father was transferred to the Rutland area. But both my father and my grandfather were police officers, as well as my great-grandfather. Wow. So my great-grandfather and grandfather were chiefs of police of Burlington way back when, and my dad, as I said, was a trooper. And I just would talk to him about what it was he did, and I just was fascinated by the whole criminal justice system.
You know that Burlington is hiring a new chief of police. You sure you don't want to pop over there?
No,
in your retirement?
I have no interest in that. But I knew. I think I'm unusual in that I knew going into law school that I wanted to be a prosecutor. I think a lot of people go to law school maybe thinking they want to study a certain kind of law, but then maybe switch, or maybe they go and they don't even know what they want to study. But I went there with the purpose of getting a law degree so that I could be a prosecutor. That was my aim, and I'm sure it had something to do with my family background.
Yeah, what about being a prosecutor appealed to you? Did you have the type of personality that was very, forthright? Did you like public speaking?
I hadn't done a lot of public speaking by that time, except for moot courts at Vermont Law School. But no, I knew a lot from my dad and things I had read about the process of court proceedings, and I find them still one of the most interesting events to watch. And in fact, I teased with someone the other day saying, when I retire, I'm going to go sit in the court in Brattleboro and watch some trials. But honestly, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to litigate, I wanted to be in trials, and I wanted to do that in cases associated with criminal justice.
Well, if you practice law in Vermont or our region and decided to go to law school in this area, perhaps at Vermont Law School, give us a call and tell us what led to that decision. 800-639-2211. So, Andrew, you are from Salt Lake City. You have a partner who's connected to this area, but still, I can imagine that was a big jump to go from out west to Vermont, small town Vermont. What exactly appealed to you about Vermont Law School? Was it a course of study there?
Well, first of all, every time I hear Justice Carroll tell her story, I feel inadequate. I came to law school. This is my.
You don't have 12 generations of
I don't.
criminal justice in your family?
I came to law school late in life, and what sort of activated me was during the first Trump administration, President Trump came out to Salt Lake City, and he reduced 2 national monuments in southern Utah that I really loved to be in, Bears Ears and Grand Staircase national monuments. And I decided basically on the spot that I was going to go to law school and learn how to be an environmental lawyer. And I essentially did an internet search, and Vermont Law School at the time was the #1 environmental law school. And I said, I'm going to go there. And we had a little bit of family, here already to sort of make that move a little bit softer, but it was a huge culture shift for me. But I'm still here 8 years later.
So did you end up following in the path that you thought you would and focusing on environmental law?
In some respects, yes. One of the things with environmental law, it can be challenging to get a job right out of law school in that field. But I have a little bit of that. I maintain in my practice. Yeah.
And being able to work in Vermont in a place that is so beautiful, I feel like you can still be connected to nature and the environment in your own way.
Totally. Yeah.
Justice Carroll, I read somewhere that you met your husband in law school. Is that true?
That's true, and I'm going to be completely honest with you and your listeners. It was at a keg party.
Yes, telling me everything.
No, he was a first-year student. I was a second-year student, and we met at a party and ended up getting married.
Do you think that happens a lot at school?
I know people in our class. I think there were maybe 2 other couples who I know when I was in law school who ended up getting married. Yeah.
And I can imagine, I know you have 3 children, is that right?
Yes.
And a very demanding career. And for any parent with that many, with kids, young kids, it must be difficult to have a job like being a judge where you're inundated, I can imagine, with work that you can't really turn off when you walk in the door.
One thing that is important to know along those lines is that judges in Vermont, unlike many other states, actually rotate where they sit. So you may sit in Windham County in family court for 2 years, and then you're sent to Bennington to be in criminal court for 2 years. So it's not as easy as driving 15 minutes to a courthouse and then driving home, and that's the end of your day. There are long drives and long days. When I was appointed as a judge, my kids were 1, 3, and 5.
Wow.
And my husband, who's, as you know, an attorney, he really took over taking them to the doctor when they were sick at school and all that. So I couldn't have done any of this without the family that I had.
Yeah. Well, let's take a call here. We have Russ calling in from Washington, Vermont. Russ, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, I am. So my name is Russ Hotchkiss. I am a deputy sheriff with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and in fact, at the moment, I am on patrol in Washington Village and calling you from their town offices. I served a term as a assistant judge, otherwise known as a side judge for Orange County, and as part of that, I received training at the Vermont Law School for additional venues. They received my training to be a judge in small claims and to become a hearing officer to sit on tickets. And I have to tell you, both my training was superb there and the law school is a huge asset for not just the community, but for the entire state.
Well, Russ, thank you so much for calling in and sharing that with us. One thing that I took away from the Brave Little State episode that we heard earlier and from the conversation we're having right now is how many people go to Vermont Law School and then stay in state to practice, that this region becomes either already is when they enter or becomes very important to folks who are practicing law there. Andrew, was that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the, some of my very dear friends that I met in school, many of them either stayed like I did or have come back to practice here. And I mean, Vermont has this amazing quality where you come here, you may not be from here, and oh my gosh, It's a totally new way of life. It's a new way to be a good neighbor in ways that are new, at least for me. And I think it's something that I heard quite often at the law school, actually, is, there are opportunities to stay in Vermont if you'd like to. And some people do, some people don't, but I count myself one of the lucky ones.
And Andrew, you were Justice Carroll's law clerk for a time. What does a law clerk do exactly?
It's probably the greatest job I have ever had, and will. You might, Michaela. I've said this before. I think one of the ways to think about being a law clerk, a good law clerk, is you're kind of like a combination of the chief of staff for the justice or the judge, and you're kind of like as well like a personal attorney. You screen things. You to some extent have control over what the Justice Carroll in this case sees, and I also would do quite a bit of sort of behind the scenes work on legal research and writing and things like that. Yeah.
And from your perspective, Justice Carroll, what was that relationship like between yourself and your law clerks?
Yeah, you have to be really close. And we don't always have to disagree on things or agree on things either, because whenever I hire for a law clerk, one of the things I tell them during the interview is I want you to disagree with me. If I tell you what I think about a case, I would like you to tell me if I'm wrong. This is a issue between the two of us, something that we should be discussing ourselves. So I always found my law clerks very willing to do that. And I've had most of my law clerks came from VLS after I became a Supreme Court justice, and they are well trained, knowledgeable of the law, and were splendid. And just getting back to coming to this state and whether law clerks or other students stay here in the state, most of them do. I'm seeing that a lot of the law clerks I've had who aren't from Vermont have come here and appreciated the community feel, the outdoors activities, the skiing, so much so that they've stayed, which is a really good thing for Vermont because we have a very aging attorney population right now that we're worried about. The judiciary being worried about it, and the Vermont Bar Association. We need young lawyers here in Vermont, and it is good that they're staying from Vermont Law School quite frequently.
Andrew, you're a hot commodity. Don't go anywhere. Listeners, don't go anywhere either. I want to continue this discussion after a short break about maybe some of the challenges facing the judicial system in Vermont and what you both think might be done to address them. Also, if you are a graduate of Vermont Law School, tell us about it. What appealed to you? Why did you apply? And if you're from out of state and came here for law school, why did you stay? 800-639-2211 is our number. This is Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Today on the show, we are discussing the role that Vermont Law and Graduate School plays in South Royalton and the surrounding area. We're also talking about Vermont's criminal justice system and the role Vermont Law School plays in that. Our guests are two graduates of Vermont Law School, the Honorable Karen Carroll, a judge on the Vermont Supreme Court, and her former law clerk, Andrew Cliburn, a partner with the firm DeMuro, Olmsted, and Osler in Norwich. Let's go right back to the phones. We have Jim calling in from East Montpelier. Jim, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Very good. Thank you. I grew up in South Royalton, and I did a little video work for Royalton College that Anthony Doria first formed, and both Royalton College and Vermont Law School really helped South Royalton be a very nice town compared to the area, and it still continues to be. I thought I could tell a very short story about how it was formed, if you'd like.
Please.
So Anthony Doria had, he didn't have that many students at Royalton College, but he had a law professor who I think actually kept coming for quite a while. I can't remember his name right now, but he had a law professor from New York up in a Sunday afternoon dinner, and Anthony was very social, and he was very generous with wine, being Italian, and he just made a wager with him. If I start a law school, will you teach a course? And the guy laughed and said, sure. The next Sunday in the New York Times, Anthony Doria put a ad in the New York Times for students to go to Vermont Law School. He accepted everyone that applied, and that's how he started the school. And this professor did come up for several years. And
yeah, he better. He lost the bet.
So I thought that might be just give a little of the very early history. But it's a really great school, and I hope it helps.
Jim, thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much for the call. We appreciate it. Have either of you, our guests, heard that story before?
No, I haven't.
Well, there you go. All right, we'll have to fact check it. But Jim, I appreciate it very much. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about the shortage, Justice Carroll, that you noted in attorneys in Vermont, or the fact that the attorney population is aging. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about those shifts that you've noticed in your career and what might be behind them.
You mean other types of shifts?
No, in terms of why the population of attorneys here, why it might be aging or there might not be enough folks to fill those roles.
We had more attorneys way back than we do now, and it is because people are retiring and not wanting to practice anymore, or sometimes people aren't retiring but they don't want to practice anymore and want to do other things. So that's part of the problem. And how that's affecting us is that I'm the chair of the State Access to Justice Coalition, which is a coalition of providers of legal services for individuals who can't afford them themselves. And we're trying to think of ways and working on ways of addressing these kind of legal deserts where certain rural places in Vermont just don't have attorneys there because of the shortage. And we're trying to figure out how we can somehow incentivize or suggest and hope that attorneys would do more pro bono work that they're doing than they're doing now. And so that's something that we're really working on here in Vermont. In fact, we have one of our law clerks in the court now working on a report about legal deserts. In other words, where in Vermont do people need help and how can we get attorneys there? Or, interestingly, there's discussion about giving lay people licenses to practice law without going to law school if all they're doing is addressing a known problem that people routinely show up in court about without lawyers. So in other words, evictions, small claims cases, simple divorces. Other states are giving individuals, after training and after approval, licenses to practice in those areas just so that we will have more people who don't have to go to law school, don't have to pay for law school, to be able to do work. And I'm not suggesting that Vermont has made that decision right now, but those are the kinds of things we're talking about.
Well, when that report on legal deserts gets finished up, you send it over to us. I'd love to learn more about that. Andrew, I'm curious if that's something that you have noticed in your own practice here. That there may be, clients who are coming from a long ways away, or there are wait lists to get the services of a law firm because of these legal deserts.
Oh my gosh, every day.
Yeah.
We get calls every day from folks who are live in locations that are underserved by attorneys, licensed attorneys, competent attorneys, and they're often calling after maybe being turned down by several other firms for various reasons, and it's just, it is an issue, and I see that as well. And, I would say, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is an ethical obligation of Vermont licensed attorneys to practice or to commit themselves to 50 hours of pro bono work per year. And it's not it's not an actionable thing for attorneys, but it is a strongly it's a good guideline, and I certainly and the folks in my firm follow that pretty closely.
Justice Carroll, in your time on the bench over the last nearly 3 decades, what other changes in Vermont's judicial system, criminal justice system, have you noticed?
Yeah, well, I would say one of the big ones is that after COVID, nobody liked COVID. No one liked working online and remotely for meetings all the time, but it has actually become a real benefit for us. And we have kept that program going, allowing judges to do hearings even, sometimes even evidentiary hearings where evidence is presented. And we do that because we've seen that in certain cases where people are very unwilling to go to court, say a victim of domestic violence, when the perpetrator might be there, we've allowed judges to hold those remotely so that they don't have to be in the same room together. And we have gotten far more of the victims of domestic violence showing up now at hearings because they can show up remotely. And the other thing we've done is we still do our 5 justice appeal cases. Those are the ones that have a legal issue that we have never addressed before, and so 5 of us are on those cases, and there are 5 of us on the court. But then we do something called a rocket docket, which is doing 3 justices on a case because it's really a fact-based case. We're not interpreting law that we've never interpreted before, and that gets back to the remote hearings because people in those cases are only given 5 minutes to argue. So if you're an attorney and you live in Burlington and you're representing someone in, Bennington, you can now do this remotely as an attorney rather than drive all the way down and only have a 5-minute argument and drive all the way back. And most importantly, your client's not paying for your attorney to do that.
Right.
So there have been positives through COVID and other measures that have allowed us to change our practices.
Yeah. Andrew, did you have something to add?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, from a sort of boots on the ground perspective, clients do see those savings if we can just simply appear remotely for a hearing that before COVID you would have been driving potentially 3 or 4 hours round trip.
Yeah. But despite these new efficiencies that have emerged since the pandemic, Vermont's judiciary does remain mired in a backlog that really got bad during the pandemic.
It did.
Justice Carroll, how do you think we get ourselves out of that?
Well, we are getting ourselves out of that. We're really improving. We're seeing the way we look at backlog is the percentage of cases that are handled every month, disposed of in whichever way they're disposed of, which could be a judgment. What percentage of those are being disposed of versus how many are coming in. And they have improved greatly. COVID was very difficult for us because you could do, as I just talked about, some civil type cases remotely, but in a criminal case, and those are the individuals who are sitting, many of them are incarcerated, waiting for their trials, but they have a right under the Constitution, both Vermont and the U.S. Constitution, to be present at a criminal trial. So we could not do those when our courthouses were closed. So it's mostly those cases that we've had to really dig in and try to address, and different judges kind of do it different ways. But our backlog has gotten much, much better. Yeah. And the one other issue we're having, and I think it's been since COVID as well, but we have staff. It's not just judges who work in the judiciary. We have staff all over the state, hundreds of people who work really, really hard and do a great job, but they're not getting paid a lot. And you have an attorney who comes in and works with that clerk often, discussing schedules and all, and then they hire them to go to their law firms. And they're getting more money there, much more money.
Sure.
So we have a loss of employees, too, that we really value. So we're almost constantly sending out notices of positions that are open.
Yes. And Vermont's workforce shortage affects many different sectors of our economy. Well, Justice Carroll, you're going to be stepping down, retiring in just a few short months. It's a big move. Andrew, I'm actually would love to hear from you here. As you know, you're in this younger generation. You have had the chance to learn from Justice Carroll as her former law clerk. I wonder if there's anything that sticks out to you as she gets ready to retire that you'll kind of carry with you from working together, your years together.
Oh my gosh, where do I begin?
Uh-oh.
I think that Justice Carroll, the first day I worked with her, which was not when I started as a law clerk, but it was a couple years before that as an intern. She is the fairest person that I have ever met. Like, so fair, and it wasn't. I soon learned that it wasn't just Justice Carroll. It was the other justices on the Supreme Court. It was the judges who sat out on the trial bench throughout the state. Just an unbelievable commitment to fairness. And in a time when you really need some people to be fair, in the judiciary, that's what I'll take. That's what I'll take from that.
That was a value that was instilled in you as a young person from your family or from school, or something that, I don't know, you've had to cultivate within yourself?
I think that what started that for me was when I was a deputy state's attorney, 25 years old, right out of law school. I thought, okay, I've got to win every case, every trial. And I talked to my boss one day, and he was the state's attorney in Windham County, and he said, it's not about winning. It's not about winning. It's about being fair and about being honest in the courtroom, and whatever happens, happens. So it kind of took the pressure off winning and focusing more on doing the right thing for me, and that's always stayed with me.
What will you be doing in your retirement?
Well, I've always wanted to have a place in Maine for the summer, and we just bought the place. So we're closing in a few weeks.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and we have a grandchild now that he'll be a year soon. So it's great to be able to spend time with him too. Well, and my kids, I should say.
Sure.
And me.
Oh, and Andrew.
You can invite yourself over to the house. The Honorable Karen Carroll of the Vermont Supreme Court. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much. It was great.
It was an honor learning about your career. And Andrew Cliburn, Justice Carroll's former law clerk and partner with the firm DeMurrell, Olmsted, and Osler in Norwich. Thank you so much for your time today, too.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Well, if you have a story about your own connection to Vermont Law School, where our two guests went to law school and where we learned more about in the Brave Little State episode that we heard earlier today, you can email us at vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. That Brave Little State episode that we aired was reported by Sabine Poux and edited and reported by Josh Crane and Burgess Brown, with digital support from Sophie Stevens. Theme music by Ty Gibbons and other music by Blue Dot Sessions. Angela Evansy is their executive producer. Today's Vermont edition was directed by Aaliyah Papes. Our managing producer is John Ahrens, and our producers are Andrea Lorian and Daniela Fierro. Rick Barrett was our call screener today, and our theme music is by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch up again soon.